Good evening, hello and welcome to Debrief. I'm Anusha Soni. There's a raging debate and outrage on social media after the Chhattisgarh High Court correctly reiterated the present legal position. Husbands cannot be prosecuted for rape by their wives. That leads us to the question, which may sound rather provocative. Does marriage give husbands a legal immunity to rape their wife? The answer, quite bluntly, is a yes. But the presumption is that most husbands will end up raping their wives. Is that an incorrect presumption to make in the first place? There are various international reports that cite rampant sexual abuse in India, mostly by partners. A UN report says that home is the most unsafe place for women. Then why is there a resistance from the government and abundant caution by the courts to recognize marital rape? In the next 30 minutes, we explore the various layers around this issue, which may be lost in the uninformed outrage and shrill conservatism. Here's a special report that we get for you. The laws around rape in the country. Section 375 of the Indian Penal Code that deals with rape has an exception, and I'm quoting, "Sexual intercourse by a man with his own wife is not rape," unquote. Consent is presumed to be implied, perpetual and irrevocable. But is there any provision under the present law that women can use for a possible remedy? Do present provisions of the Indian Constitution offer any resolution to a woman? In a country where 1 out of 3 women have experienced sexual or physical abuse by their partners, can we conveniently ignore this debate? Here's a report which breaks down the present provisions of the law and why this debate is a grey area and not a black and white one, as is often represented in the popular discourse.
This is the law of the land. Recently, it was the Chhattisgarh High Court which reiterated this position. In the 21st century, why does such a law exist? How did it originate? In law, it can be traced back to the manner in which the English jurisprudence developed. In 1736, it was Sir Matthew Hale who spoke about the matrimonial consent that cannot be taken away by the wife. It's implied and irretractable. It was only in 1991 that the UK recognized spousal rape. Over 150 countries across the world have recognized marital rape. In India, though, the issue remains a hugely debated one. The key hesitation in recognizing marital rape is about the evidentiary issues it may pose. Under the present rape laws, a woman's statement is that of a witness, based on which arrests can be made. If spousal rape is to be recognized under this category, it could open a Pandora's box of false complaints or revenge litigation once a relationship sours. In the absence of any forensic relationship due to prior sexual relationships, it may be very difficult to prove such cases in courts. But is this reason enough to deny a woman a remedy under the law? Under the present law, a woman can make a complaint under Section 377. This provision punishes anyone for unnatural sex. Various other provisions under the Indian Penal Code can be used by women in case of sexual or physical violence against them. The Domestic Violence Act also recognizes sexual assault as one of the grounds for seeking protection. The Justice Verma Committee, formed post the Nirbhaya gang rape in 2012, also recommended that marital rape must be recognized in India. The Delhi High Court has admitted a petition seeking recognition of marital rape as an offence. In 2017, the Union government told the Delhi High Court that recognition of marital rape may destabilize the institution of marriage. The Union government also cited the Law Commission report and the view of the Standing Committee on this issue, batting for the non-criminalization of marital rape. With the government already making its stand clear, any reform or change to the present law can only be brought by the courts. With Anusha Soni, Anisya Kumar for CNN News 18.
Here is another aspect of this debate. What's often easily dismissed is anything said under the umbrella of what they call men's rights. It's politically inconvenient to spell out that just about 5% of rape cases result in conviction, or 498A has proven to be misused rampantly. It's because of this reason that the Supreme Court had to put checks and balances. Laws cannot be framed in outrage. Laws cannot pitch one community or gender against the other. For any law to be actually helping the vulnerable group it aims to help, it needs to be balanced. It need not be designed in a way that leads to excessive misuse. It's true that all laws can be misused. I'd like to add there that there are some laws which are designed to be more misused than used correctly. Here's a special report by my colleague Ritangshu breaking down this side of the argument about the marital rape.
MRA, Men's Rights Activism. It's a term that's rapidly gaining currency in the discourse for gender equality. Some see MRAs as the voice of the voiceless men who have been at the receiving end of gender-based laws. Others dismiss MRAs as just another manifestation of toxic masculinity, intent on not giving women their voice. But when it comes to the debate around marital rape, it is these activists who are the loudest voices against it. Because in the eyes of MRAs, the law is already biased towards women and offers men little or no protection from fake cases of dowry, domestic violence, rape or sexual abuse. Moreover, activists feel that even existing precedents over alimony, maintenance and child custody are overwhelmingly loaded in favor of women. In such a scenario, having a law on marital rape, which effectively takes the woman's word as law and puts the burden of proof on the accused, is being seen as another step against men's rights.
It is very difficult to prove that husband is innocent. The law can be misused, the law can be highly misused. So this is something one has to be very cautious.
There are 4 key objections to recognizing marital rape. To begin with, the jurisprudence of marriage is based around the concept of reconciliation and mediation. Rape cases, remember, cannot be settled via mediation. Moreover, activists say that provisions already exist within the Domestic Violence Act and Section 498A of the IPC. Finally, there are concerns over the rampant misuse of a law which can easily turn it draconian. The moral and legal complexities around this is precisely why the courts have so far refrained from having a constitutional debate on the matter. The Delhi High Court had held hearings in 2018 only to eventually dismiss it the next year, citing it to be the domain of the legislature. And so, the debate over marital rape continues. Ritangshu Bhattacharya for CNN News 18.
Well, India finds itself in the uncomfortable company of countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan when it comes to not recognizing marital rape explicitly. Which are the countries that recognize marital rape explicitly, criminalize it? Over 150 countries across the world, which includes countries like Ireland, Canada, United States, United Kingdom, from where the entire jurisprudence really originated, all of them have reformed their laws. Now, if you talk about countries like Malaysia, Israel, United Kingdom, most of these countries governed under the common law. It's countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the South Asian nations, which are known, unfortunately, to be the countries where violence against women is very high. And look at the company we are in right now, Algeria, Afghanistan, China. All these countries do not recognize marital rape as an explicit offense. Now, that's where the problem lies. Yes, you require checks and balances to be put in place. But that said, how does one really go ahead and recognize marital rape? The courts will have to do the job. Strictly speaking, the central government filed an affidavit back in 2017 at the Delhi High Court, and they said that if you criminalize marital rape, simply put, it's going to break down the institution of marriage, and that's something we can't do. Now, joining us on the broadcast are our guests, our special panelists who will give us more perspective on this entire issue. Joining us is Tara Krishnaswamy, who is the co-founder of Political Shakti and Citizens for Bengaluru. I also have Sanjay Ghosh, who is a senior advocate at the Supreme Court of India. Mr. Ghosh, I'll begin with you. I lay the floor open to you. What are your thoughts on doing away with the exception under the Indian Penal Code 375? Is it time that exception should be done away with?
Well, first of all, I must compliment you for a very, very even-handed presentation of both the sides of this argument. And unfortunately, you know, the issue is so complex. At one level, you correctly said that more than 100 countries have criminalized marital rape. Yeah. And we stand in a very infamous company. And the whole argument, as you rightly said, by the government before the Delhi High Court that marriages will break has not happened in those countries. But this is something which we have to be very cautious about. I am not saying it should not be done, because it's time we give women the right to dignity. And marriage cannot be a license to be raped. It cannot be an implied consent in perpetuity to be forced to have sex against her consent. But at the same time, please remember that the process is the punishment for both men and women.
That's true.
The process where you have criminal cases which go on for years, where you have to run around chasing for bails, anticipatory bails, police interrogation, the humiliation, and also the defamation. So this affects both women and men. So therefore, and the last thing I would like to say as means, as way of introductory comments, also remember our laws of perjury are very weak. Our cases take ages to happen, and anyone can make any allegation and no one faces a prosecution. Remember, Jeffrey Archer, the member of parliament, went to jail because he gave a false evidence. In our country, false evidence by the man or the woman is hardly punished.
That's true.
So I am avoiding a direct answer to you, but I think it is time we move towards criminalization, but with cautious baby steps.
With cautious baby steps. Tara, I'm coming to you. How potent is this argument that doing away with exception will only lead to misuse? We have seen at many instances there are various groups that argue that 498A has been rampantly misused. Rape cases, only about 5% of them result in conviction. As an activist, how do you see all these arguments?
I actually agree with most of what, the previous panelists said, and I must reiterate that you also gave a fabulous introduction to a very complex and a very, in some sense, a very tragic issue. At the bottom of this, I think there are a few things we must keep in mind as we evaluate this issue, right? One is that close to 90%, I think 86% of rapes in India are committed by men within the family or well known to the family and the women, right? In other words, most rapists, see, depending on how you construct the sentence, right, things look a little less problematic or more. Most rapists are male family or male friends, right? So now when that is the case, then, and we know that rapes themselves are underreported, right, because of the stigma and the patriarchy. Then the prevalence of this is much more than we imagine it to be. It is not as uncommon as we think it to be. On the one hand. On the second hand, forget about marital rape and think about domestic violence. I think from a legal perspective, no one is arguing that domestic violence is okay. While when it comes to passing a judgment, some judges may look the other way and pretend like it's okay, so long as it is not battery, right? Or even in surveys, you find out that men and women alike think that it's okay for a husband to hit a wife. I think from a legal perspective, as a democracy, we understand that domestic violence is unacceptable. Now, rape is violence. It is not sex.
I agree with you. Tara,
it ends in bodily harm.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I want to move to another layer of the argument here. You broadly agree with the points that we have discussed so far. Sanjay, coming back to you. You say we need to gradually and cautiously move towards criminalizing and explicitly recognizing marital rape. What will those steps really look like?
Yes. So first of all, we'll have to improve the process of matrimonial justice. So remember this, a lot of the times these 498 cases, 498A cases which you are talking about are false cases or they get dropped is not because they are dropped because they are false. They are dropped often because the woman cops out of the system and the woman enters into a settlement or reconciles. So also remember, a lot of the time there is a pressure to file a criminal case and not go for a civil case because it is perceived that only if the policeman lands up at the door of the mother-in-law and the husband act and be fair and give some maintenance. If she files a civil case, she'll be running around getting the order and then running around getting the order executed. So that is why when we campaigned for the Domestic Violence Act under the banner of the Lawyers Collective, we came up with this solution which is neither civil nor criminal, which was a midway, a halfway house of the domestic violence protection, even against sexual violence by the husband and economic violence. So to come to your point directly, so the moment you and I know it's easier said than done, but we have to start this. The moment you ensure a woman that she will get matrimonial justice within 6 months, and a divorce case will be decided within 6 months, you're going to have, and you'll be ensured that there'll be no fake claims, no kind of wrong cases filed, and women will get their justice in a timely manner. So therefore, those who will actually be filing the matrimonial, who will be then actually pressing this case of marital rape, are actually the genuine people who are really aggrieved by forced sexual assault on them by their husband.
A robust system, a bottom-up approach, not the top-down approach. Tara, coming back to you, what are the various reasons that women fail to prosecute, say, families, their in-laws who are not really fair to them or who have been perpetuating violence against them? What are the various facets in the present legal and prosecution system that needs to be fixed before we bring in another law, or we do away with this exception which gives immunity to the husbands?
See, mainly law, there's a previous question that said, when it's difficult to prove, why have such a law, right? Traffic laws are most often broken, and we still have such a law, right? They're violated. They are never enforced, or very rarely enforced, most traffic violations, yet we have a law. So law doesn't always exist only because it is going to be enforced. It should be enforceable, of course. But also because it serves as a deterrent. So the fact that the law doesn't exist, that it is not considered domestic violence, that it is not considered rape, means that you're sending a signal, both with Parliament and state assemblies. It's on the concurrent list. States can enact a law themselves. By them not enacting it, they are sending a signal to three sets of people. States, the Parliament and the judiciary. If you take the Chhattisgarh verdict, not only is the verdict itself horrific, the fact that the judge didn't make any sort of commentary outside of that to talk about the dignity of the woman or, bodily integrity, whatever it is, right? So that sends a signal to three sets of people. A, it sends a signal to married men that says there is a license to rape, right? State gives you a license to rape. Second, it sends a signal to rapists, married or unmarried. I'll tell you why. Because you just told the guy the consent of the woman is not important always.
Well, I agree with those broad points, Tara, that you're making.
So that means the woman, so the signal to the woman is what? That if I come forward, the chance of winning is near zero. The chance of proving it, the chance
I agree. And this is still a country where unfortunately we see often cases where the rape victims are asked to marry the offenders, and that's the culture we need to do away with. Thank you. Thank you,
There's also one point.
Yes, Sanjay, very quickly, 20 seconds.
Yeah. Quickly, the point is now it's time to recognize irretrievable breakdown of marriage as a ground for divorce.
All right.
Often women are forced to stay in these marriages because of this.
Sanjay and Tara, thank you so much for joining us on that broadcast, and with all the thoughts that you've presented before us. We'll continue talking about the story on the other side of a quick break. Welcome back. Marital rape is a crime which is camouflaged by a culture of silence. Often it's the law that steps in to correct the social wrongs. But in this case, law further codifies a regressive social idea that a husband has absolute right over his wife's sexuality. Moreover, this topic is considered as a taboo, an elephant in the room long being overlooked by a rigidly patriarchal society across religions in the country. What makes it further complicated is the fact that marriage and divorce are governed by personal laws in the country. Here's a report exploring the intertwined cultural and legal layers around the issue of marital rape. Marital rape is one social evil in India that no one wants to talk about. According to a United Nations report, 75% of married women in India are subjected to marital rape. Another 2011 survey found that 1 in 5 men has forced his partner or wife to have sex. Despite these telling numbers, institutions are afraid to take this evil bull by the horns. The age-old belief that pati or the husband, being the god, who enjoys absolute right over his wife, has led to the situation, while fortifying the so-called moral position of a husband, forcing himself upon his wife.
Marriage has the social, religious, cultural sanctions where the wife is the property of this man. Laws also continue to tell us that if this husband rapes this wife, the law will not do anything, whereas our 375 IPC does not say so. It is important today for law to step in to accept that marital rape is something that happens and there should not be any sanctions, overt or covert, and there should be punishment to the perpetrator.
The Hindu Marriage Act does not recognize rape as a ground for divorce. Neither the Islamic personal law has any provision where women can press for divorce upon being raped by their husbands. Marriage has been a fiercely guarded domain for all religions, especially when it comes to recognizing marital rape. And it's not just the religious clergy who have opposed the recognition. Back in 2017, while the constitutionality of marital rape was being debated at the Delhi High Court, the centre opposed the recognition of marital rape, arguing it may lead to breakdown of the institution of marriage. Centre argued that any change in law will lead to malicious prosecution of men. The entire issue hinges upon the notion of consent and how most religions have perceived it. Canon law presumed women to be the property of their husbands. Most religions presumed that the consent given by women in marriage cannot be revoked, and that notion has been carried and codified onto laws for generations. India is just one of the 36 countries in the world where marital rape is not criminalized. Along with the legal reform, it's the social and behavioral change that must set the tone for a well-balanced change with proper checks and balances. Anusha Soni for CNN News 18. Well, as we close this show, we end by saying that Indian Penal Code needs to recognize marital rape explicitly. Women must have a remedy, a stronger one than what exists right now. But that remedy needs to come with carefully drafted laws, with adequate checks, a police force which is professionally trained and equipped, and more judges in the trial court to hear the victims. Without this ecosystem, any reform, any law would only be a tool of witch hunt, failing to serve the purpose. Perhaps this is also the time to recognize that laws pertaining to sexual assault need to be gender neutral. On that note, it's a wrap. Thank you for watching.